time to make a start. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the introduction workshop for AphA's professional registration. We'll start off with a bit of introduction. So for those who don't know me, I'm Mark Foy. Day job is Associate Director of Performance at Manchester University Hospitals, and I'm also a member of AphA's Professional Development Committee. And I've got Josie with me today, if you want to say hello.
Yep, hi, I'm Josephine Browning. My day job is Head of BI down at NHS Gloucestershire. I work for the ICB, and I'm also part of the Professional Development Committee alongside Mark.
Thank you. So in terms of just kind of rules for today, this is an open kind of interactive session. So please do stick your hand up, shout out questions in the chat, however you want. This is for you guys to obviously to find out a bit more about professional registration. It's, you know, I've got some slides to go through. Josie and I will talk you through the process, but yeah, can't stress enough. Do chip in, shout out. I don't mind which etiquette you want to follow. More questions, however they come in, the better, and we'll kind of talk through as much as we can. We've got an hour, so we'll whiz through. There will be some time for questions. As I say, do shout out as we go along. So just set a bit of background. Obviously, I'm very conscious some people might have varying degrees of understanding. Somebody might know nothing. Somebody might be re-accrediting or may have started and wants a bit more. So we'll try and pitch it at all level. There is a Q&A workshop later in the month, in April, that you can go through where you can talk about specific questions. So this is kind of the broad overview that we'll talk through today. So just a bit of an overview on the registration, how it links in with AphA and FedIP. So obviously AphA is a professional body for analysts and analytical family, data scientists, business intelligence, and AphA is a member of FedIP, which is the umbrella organisation. So that's who the accreditation sits with. So when you do it and when you pass, you will appear on the FedIP register and get your name on the website from there. But they're the kind of overarching body. They're the ones who set the standards for all of the FedIP bodies. And AphA and the Professional Development Committee adapt those standards for analyst function roles, which is what we'll go into detail on today. Yeah, so I say AphA, there's core standards, which I'll talk about in a minute. These have been tailored to be suitable for analysts. And that's managed by the Professional Development Committee, who do the assessing and make sure that the standards are fit for purpose. Anybody who may have looked at registration in the past, over the last couple of years since it's been a thing, if anyone's looked recently, you may notice that the forms are often changing, and you'll be pleased to know often shrinking as we try to streamline and remove duplication from this. So that's what the role of the PDC is, just to make sure it's as robust, but also as easy for you guys to apply as possible. I just want to touch very briefly on the National Competency Framework, which hopefully most of you are aware of or heard of. A lot of questions we get asked is, what is the relationship with professional registration and the National Competency Framework? The simple way I kind of talk about it is the National Competency Framework is the skills you need to do your job, and that's a framework that sets out for them. Professional registration is how you apply those tools of experience and decisions you make, rather than what skills you've got. When we're talking about registration, it's not about, hey, I've built the best dashboard, aren't my skills amazing? It's, here's the thought process I've gone through, here's the logic I've followed, this is the checks and the decisions I've made to do my piece of work, not who's got the shiniest tools and the fanciest code. Just before I move on, Josie, to edit a bit, why don't you want to chip in with anything around kind of the overarching scene? Oh, you're on mute.
No, I think you've covered it. It's definitely more about proving that you can use the tools rather than showing that you've got the tools in some ways when we're looking at the professional registration. Has anyone got any questions at this point? Does that all make sense to everybody so far?
No, all good.
We're quiet up.
we'll get you talking soon. Okay, so hopefully you've made the first step. You've all come along to this. So to why apply? Really just that it's an opportunity to demonstrate your skills and the commitment towards your career. I really see it personally as like a bit of a badge of honor to wear as an analyst, you know, to be part of that community, and you know, like you've had your skills assessed and your kind of competency assessed. I think applicants really talk about kind of a bit of a confidence boost and that feeling of having a community behind you when you're making decisions. I mean, you'll all have your own individual reasons, but I think for me that was it. It was that sense of belonging and knowing that, you know what, I know I can do a good job. I know that the analytics I'm producing is good. It's been assessed. I'll put you on the spot now, Josie, for kind of what it means to you.
Oh no, it absolutely. When I did it a little while ago now, I was one of the first, and it really made me feel proud to be one of the first to have gone through the process. It certainly made me sort of more confident in my skills, and it supported me with getting various additional opportunities that may have been harder had I not been able to say, "Oh, look, and I'm professionally registered. I've put my commitment into this process," and then my organisation um, came up with some funds for some further training and stuff so that I could further develop my skills. So it really does stand you in good stead if you can do this.
Yeah, and hopefully it gives people a bit of gravitas if you don't have it previously. You know, you've probably all been asked at one point to do a piece analysis where, you know, the answer may be predetermined and you know, you've been asked to prove a point, or maybe you've been asked to display something in a way that you don't think is the best way to do it because you think there's better ways to do stuff, but people want it in different ways. And hopefully this will give you a bit of a, you know, a bit more of that back in to kind of have those, I won't say arguments, but, you know, the bit of pushback and challenge. They actually, I'm a fresh veg analyst. This is the way I think we should do it, and it's better, and this is why. And you can kind of fall back on it from there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so on to what you need to do then. So the steps which we'll walk you through now. So there is 5 levels you can apply at, ranging from associate practitioner up to leading practitioner. There's a slide in a bit which talks about the difference. So I'll put that on screen shortly. Just a note there to say we do only want the official documents only. So, you know, you may have done various degrees or apprenticeships or qualifications. We can use them as evidence, but in terms of the paperwork, it is only the AphA forms that we want to accept. But again, we'll talk a bit about evidence and what counts from there. And all the documents, as you imagine, are on the AphA website. I'm sure you can all navigate a website, but if you can't, that's Professional Registration Plays, and there's a button at the bottom there for where to get your documents and where to download them from. What that will do is take you through to registration forms. So as I say, FedIP are the overarching body, and we now use their hub to download the applications and to receive applications in from there. So when you go via the AphA website and fill the details in, it will then take you to register with the FedIP hub if you're not registered already, and that's where you can get all the paperwork and where you will ultimately submit it from there. Any questions before I start to talk a bit through the standards? No, everyone's keen for a quick finish today. All right, I'll have to. Okay, so the standards that we're talking about when we say them is there's 9 areas which I've got on screen there. I'm not going to read through them, but there's all various domains. And as we said, it's all about kind of your thought process or decision making or the journey you make. So you can sometimes think of it like a car journey down a road. You know, you think about what you're going to do, how you're going to solve it, and then a bit about your accountability, how you work with others, how you communicate from there. So what we're looking for is for you to evidence that you hit those standards. So, you know, when you're applying your methods and choosing what to do, what thought process you're going through, how you're making those decisions, what made you do that, evidence of how you communicate. And again, we'll talk about the levels in a bit. So that communication might just be from yourself and immediate people to actually your leading departments, and how are you communicating to wider numbers or external, you know, depending on your role from there. Hopefully that's big enough on screen for you there. So this is just an example of a few of the standards with a bit more detail. So when we're saying applying methods, example for this one is, you know, when you're undertaking tasks, how are you selecting and identifying your methods, tool and procedures from there? And then there's a bit of guidance for what we want you to tell us about really. And I'll come on to reflective practices and how you kind of record this in a minute. But what we want you to consider for that one is, you know, what did you do? How did you choose it? And what happened as a result of that from there? I'll just leave them on screen for a second rather than me read them out. So this is all on the application form that you'll download. So you can, again, if you don't need to make a note of this, it's on the paperwork when you download it. And again, I'll keep this on screen for a second as well. This is the last 4 standards from there. This will be really good to refer back to when you're writing your reflective practices. Let's say these are the points that if you kind of answer those questions, you know you're going to hit those standards then, in terms of, you know, you're talking about the right things. Just while people are reading, Josie, I don't know if anything you want to add about.
Yeah. No, I think it's just really key. Make sure you go, once you've written your reflective practice, to go kind of back over this piece of the document just to make sure you're ticking all of those boxes. And I know we'll come on to it, but there's also sort of a matrix to help you tick everything off, and that really helps us as assessors to make sure that you've covered all the bases, because we will come back and ask questions if we're not sure.
And just to go back to that point about, you know, this isn't about to assess the best piece of work you've done. You say a lot of these questions it could have been an absolute disaster. You know, you tried to do something and you know what, you didn't have the skills to do it, but, you know, by recognizing that I would have liked to have done this if I could do it, or this would have worked if this happened, that's just as powerful as here's my shiny finished product. You know, I say it's really about recognizing your journey. So a lot of these about what was the output, you know, it might be it didn't work, or no, all fell apart, but you know, you can still describe it from there. Hopefully I've got some good examples of that did succeed. So that's the core standards, and then there's these contextual standards, which are quite kind of, I can say, like softer ones, or, you know, they're a bit more cross-cutting. So the way we kind of do it is you've got all your core standards, but, you know, having awareness of your role, talking about information governance and that from there. These are some bits you need to evidence from there as well. We'll come on a bit more to these in a bit when we talk through evidence and how we do that. But these are kind of your underpinning things about, you know, I think it's really important as analysts to understand your role and the value that brings to organizations, and that, so that's what those first couple are there, is actually, are you aware of your impact that you can have, and how, and to see to there, you know, how you link in with other people, all vital bits that, you know, love to hear kind of what people are doing.
Absolutely.
So just in terms of comparing the levels, again, this is on the website to download with a bit more detail on bits below it, but this is the high level, just to get a flavour for how the levels evolve. I've not included associate practitioner on that. That is kind of like for entry level post, to kind of pledge your commitment to become professionally registered in
2
I think
years.
within
We
2
give
years
them 2
time, we say
years.
from
Yeah.
there. So I've left that off because there's not full paperwork to complete for that. But for the practitioner to lead, and this is where you need to complete the full paperwork and the evidence from there. So again, I'll leave this on screen for a second, but hopefully you can kind of get a flavour for how they build up. So again, if you just talk about the top one, so a practitioner is responsible for themselves. So senior might be yourself and a couple others. Advanced is more, and then leading is, you know, accountable for large groups of people. I'll just leave that on for a second. What I would say from this is 100% not linked to job titles, not linked to pay bands. So don't feel I'm a senior analyst, I've got to apply at senior, or I'm a head of, I've got to apply here. It's all about you and where your kind of skills and experience lie. So what I would recommend to do is, when you go into the hub, you can download a few of the levels and just have a look through and see where you place yourself. And this document has them all side by side. And I'd probably go through, tick, highlight, and just say which ones you think are your level, and then make that choice then of which one to go with. What I probably would say is, I think it's quite important to pitch it at the right level, and it can be dangerous going too high or too low. Because what you might find is the practitioner does talk about stuff beneath you because you maybe are a bit more senior, or actually if you were to say, actually, am I going to chance it and go a bit higher, you may struggle to provide evidence from there. So there's no right or wrong way. What I would say as well is, as a PDC and as assessors, we want you to pass and we will work with you on this. So don't worry about it too
Absolutely.
much, picking the right level or the wrong level. Do what you can. And then when it comes to being assessed, if we feel actually you've pitched it too high, we can work with you to lower it. Or actually, if we feel you've gone too low here, your evidence is great, your examples are great, with a few tweaks, you can do the high level. We will work with you on that. Josie, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think you've covered it absolutely. As assessors, we ultimately want you to pass and get you onto the register. We're not here to mark things down. So yeah, there's different ways, but we'll work with you to try and get you across the line. If so, some applications need a bit of extra support. Quite a lot of applications we will go back and ask questions on. So if you get asked questions, it doesn't mean you've done a bad job at the application. It just means that we're being thorough in our job and making sure that we understand everything that you've said. And sometimes it can be a quick couple of emails, or we may end up even meeting with you on Teams if there's pieces of evidence that we'll come on to later on that you can't send to us, that you want to show us on screen. You can add notes into your application if that helps as well. We're more than happy to have a Teams conversation. Technology has made this possible.
Yeah, really good point that about Teams and stuff. We do understand there will be some confidential stuff that you'd rather not share. As Josie said, we want you to pass. We want to work with you. We can support you around those hurdles. So don't let that be a reason not to apply. If you think, oh, I'm not going to be able to share this, or I don't want to do that. Okay, any questions for anybody about standards before I talk a bit about reflective practices? No, you are quiet. Hopefully it means we're making sense.
If you've got any questions you don't want to shout out, put your hands up. Please do pop it in the chat as well, because I will pick up questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just checking the chat's working actually, because I think last time I was locked out of the chat, which was made fun. Okay, so I'm just going to talk through an example now. I mean, there will be infinite examples that all of you can do, and that is probably the hardest point when it comes to choosing where you start from this. Oh, thank you for the comment. There we go. People can hear us and the chat works. Thank you very much. So I know when I did my one, the hardest part was staring at the blank piece of paper and going, actually, what do I write about? And you start thinking, what's the meatiest piece of work I've done, or can I write about that? Or this would be really good. As I say, it's not about the best piece of work you've done, but it's about the best piece where you can talk about the journey and the point you've made from there. And it really can be, I know there's no simple stuff, but simple ad hocs and stuff, as long as you're engaged with people, solving a problem, developing a report, presenting it and getting feedback on it, something very simple like that will start to hit the standards. So the example we'll talk through now is hopefully one that is familiar to some of you, and you can start to see how simple some of this can be to hit the standards from here. So again, I won't read through all these bullet points on screen because I'm sure you're all capable of reading, but so this is just going to be a piece of work someone's done about a frailty service. They were asked to do some work around the effectiveness of a frailty service. So when we talk about reflective practices, again, that might be a term that might scare people because not many people like reflecting on what they do. But basically, we use this STAR model, which we'll talk through now, which hopefully should kind of make it a bit clearer or not as daunting for some people. So STAR is situation, task, actions, and results. So basically, just want to tell you what the situation was, why did it come across? The tasks is what you were going to do. So, when you come to your planning, and it'll be all those micro thoughts that come into your head, whenever somebody asks you to do an ad hoc, the clogs will start turning, you'll start thinking, oh, I'll need to do that. I'll need to do that. I might need to speak to them. Oh, I might be able to get that, but I might do this instead. And that's some of the hardest things is kind of documenting those decisions that you guys will just make in a split second in your head, but actually taking the time to slow it down and go, actually, I'll do this, then I'll do that. The actions is what you've actually done. So I wrote this, I did that, this didn't work, so I did that. And then the results is I wrote a report, I built a dashboard, I did a presentation, whatever else, got some feedback, everyone loved it, my analysis was great and it improved everything, and isn't everything wonderful? And then what we ask you to do is in those bullet points, which I'll talk for a minute, is apply them to the core standards from there. Before I move on to the example, Josie, anything about reflective practice you want to pick up?
Hopefully it comes through in the example. Obviously, we've just gone through the star part of the reflective practice, but there are two elements to reflective practice. So there's the what bits on the second page, which is like the what did you learn, what went well, what didn't go so well, and what would you do differently? Because that really helps us to contextualize what you're taking as or what you're describing to us, and it really helps us when we're assessing your application to get that additional context on how you're feeling as you're going through this process, because it's also about if it all went completely wrong and the report was a disaster and it didn't work and the person didn't like it, that what would I do next time really helps, because then we can see that you've learned from that process and you take a different approach next time.
100%, yeah, we've got an example of that coming up as well. And thank you for the lovely comments in the chat as well. It's good to know. Yes, 100%. We'll share slide rounds afterwards as well. Okay, so hopefully as we talk through this now, again, you'll start to kind of get those light bulb moments in your head about, how this can be done and what you can apply it to. So in this situation from here, again, it might seem simple, but again, it's all those processes that you go through and probably take for granted. So again, just documenting that this person was asked to join a team as the data analyst lead to support the establishment of a frailty service from there. What you'll notice then is where they've put SB7 and C2. So just by saying I've joined a team and I was asked to support them, you're starting to now evidence your collaborative working from there. And again, the C2, the contextual standard, actually being aware of your role and how you can support this. So again, something as simple as that, we're now starting to cover standards off from there. Sorry, I thought someone was going to talk then. So again, just talk through step by step. So this is why they were doing it. So as an organization, they signed up to this network program. So that's why they were doing it, again, just given the context. And then this person said that they attended some workshops to learn a bit more about it. So again, evidence of CPD and whatnot from there. And it became apparent then that there was going to be different ways to do this. So there's, again, just setting the scene. And again, a few references there about, attended meetings, workshops, and they decided the best way they were going to do this. They wanted to present it in a bar chart once enough data, but actually this person wanted to do it in an SBC chart, so they were going to do this. So again, hopefully really simple stuff, but as you can see from that, starts to tick off a few standards just by outlining those thought processes from there. So yeah, I'm just going to trust in you, Josie, that you've got the chat in hand there. Oh, yes,
I am. I'm just going to work through answering those as we go. The questions about the number of people registered, just give me a minute. I need to do a little bit of a dig up.
Okay, so on to task now. So that situation was literally just setting the scene, why you're involved, what you're doing it, what the challenge, the question it's going to solve is. The task is now, okay, what are you going to do? So this person again said, right, they were going to attend some meetings, discuss with our analysts how best to do this. So again, this is about thinking about how you're going to solve those problems. They then thought there was going to be an issue with how they flag it or how they record it. So again, how are we going to solve that problem? So again, how do we kind of unpick problems that we assume we're going to come across from there? They said they were going to have to write some SQL and they were going to have to query it from the data warehouse. And then they said, actually, I don't know that much about frailty. So actually, I arranged some meetings to speak to people to learn a bit more about it. So again, hitting a few standards there about working with others and, filling knowledge gaps from there. And they said they were going to have to build a series of charts from there to present the information back. So again, we've now set the scene of what we're doing, why we're doing it. This is what are we going to do? And yet again, SB2 at the top one, SB4, SB1, really hitting the standards just by kind of, I say stating the obvious, but just by talking through the steps that I'm 100% confident you will all do. So then we go on to actions. So again, I attended a course and I learned a bit more about this. So again, that hit several standards. Wrote SQL scripts, spoke to the business intelligence team, again, working with others, choosing tools to get data. Of course, they built pivot tables. We all work in Excel and build pivot tables, don't we? So yeah, that was the method they chose. And that's back to the point about don't feel you've got to have built the shiniest Tableau or Power BI dashboard. Excel is a choice, even if you don't think it's the best choice. You could reference, I would have liked to have done this, I would have liked to have done that, but I chose Excel because it was quicker and everyone can work with it, and it met the needs better from there. Again, all choices of how you're choosing methods to solve a problem. They created some bar charts and they were going to convert into SPC chart. They presented the data, so now we're back onto communication now and a bit about terminology. So again, making sure they were explaining stuff. And they did all their data quality checks and made sure that they got a peer to check it or whatnot from there. So again, all steps you'll do to make sure the work you're providing is suitable. And then the last bit of the star is the results. So again, just reference to that the frailty team were very happy and loved the presentation. Everyone was impressed and thanked them. So again, we'll come on to evidence in a minute, but in this they put reference to actually the feedback they got, which was positive. So hopefully you've got lots of those little emails lying around that says thank you for this, you're a star, this is a great piece of work, all really good evidence that you're getting feedback on your work. And I'm sure you probably all got emails where someone says, oh, thanks for this, but could I just have it this way, or could you just change this to me, or I don't quite like that color, could you change that? Again, all really soft evidence of how you're responding to people's needs. And yes, Julian, I'm sure you've all got an appreciation folder. So again, talks a bit more about identifying how they handle patient information. As I say, IG and GDPR is one of the cross-cutting ones. So again, all the stuff that you follow, I'm sure you'll all try not to include as much patient detail as you can, unless you have to. And then if you do that, you've got appropriate access and controls around that. Again, probably all take it for granted, but again, just taking that time to think about, oh yeah, we don't do this, we do that. Or if somebody wants patient names, we make sure there's some access restrictions to it from there. And then last one to say, they loved it. And now, as it always goes, can I have this every month from there? So again, there might be a bit about how that's automated or how that's built up from there. So that is the first part of a reflective practice where you can see from all the kind of little red notes there, talking through is, again, I'm going to use the word simple, but it's nothing too complex or fancy. It's just a piece of an ad hoc that turned into regular support in a project. But just by talking through an example like that, you're starting to hit so much of the standards from there. We'll come on to evidence in a minute of what will support this. But hopefully if anybody has gone, oh, where do I start? I don't know what to do. That was quite a simple walkthrough of a relatively straightforward ad hoc to hit the standards. Josie, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've covered that pretty well.
So when you've finished, it will look like this on your page. So this is below. This is on the main application form. So again, nice view from there. So Josie mentioned earlier the second part of the reflective practice, which often is overlooked. And we are going to do a bit of work on the forms just to kind of show the worth of this, because it's a really useful section, I think, for an assessor. As I said before, sometimes things don't go to plan, or you do something in the time you've been given with the resources you've got. And if you had longer, and if you had more tools or resources or more people, you'd have done it differently. It's all really great to say that, and don't be shy to say, actually, I did it in Excel in a pivot table because that was the best I had. If I could do this, I would have done that. Or I was only given an afternoon to complete this piece of work, and actually I would have liked to take a bit more care, do this, do that. So really good to get them across. And it's, again, Josie, do come in. I find it really interesting as an assessor to read these examples and see what people's are doing. And often you get the best bit of insight from these bits here about the what went well, or what did you learn, or what you do differently.
You really do. It really starts to add the context as well. So it gives a bit of you, because you're really describing um, how that felt for you as you went through the process. And I do think that it really helps me when I'm assessing if this bit's completed.
Yeah.
If you don't complete it, I generally come back to you and say, "Can I have the other bit, please?"
Yeah. Someone's just asked a question in the chat, but yeah, so we asked for a minimum of 3 reflective practices. What you can do now, this is how kind of I did it. So obviously you're going to look at the standards. You're going to think, right, what can I talk about that's going to hit these? And you might have I know if I call it a meaty example, meaty project that you think I'm going to start to do this. So you start to write it and you start to tick off the standards. And then you might find there's 2 or 3 that, you've maybe not been able to evidence enough, or you think I've not covered them. When you come to do your second, obviously start to tailor your examples, think actually this is something I'm a bit, I'll come back to the GDPR and the IG one. Actually that might have not been much of a factor for one of your pieces of work. So your next example might be actually something that leans more towards that. And then the third one, again, you can mop a penny overs or really emphasize the point that you want to make, or your skills and experience from there. You can do more. Trying to think what the most I've ever seen. I don't think I've seen more than 4 actually.
No, I don't think I've seen more than 4. Generally,
Yeah.
people can cover it in sort of 3 to 4. There is a section in the form where if you don't cover one of the standards in your reflective practices, you can add the evidence to cover that standard, and then write your contextual information in a box on the form as well. Because we do want everything kind of, you know, laid out easily for us, so we can make sure that you've ticked all the boxes. Because if you don't quite meet all of them, we will be in touch to say, "Oh, you've missed this bit."
Yeah. And in a few slides, I've got a sample of the matrix that you can tick off the standards as you go along. So really good for you to refer back to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the main application paperwork now. But before I do, is there anybody who wants to shout out about any reflective practice questions? I can see the chat's being used, so hopefully that's covered most. Okay. So I'll just walk you through the application form. Fairly standard stuff, to be honest. This won't be this won't be where you spend much of your time on. But we'd just like to know a little bit about you, to understand the context of your role and where you work. As I say, AphA is the professional body for the whole analytics family, including data engineers, data scientists, so this gives us a flavour. I'm probably very guilty of it today. I've spoken very much about analysts because it's just easier. But even if you're a data engineer, data scientist, talk about what's relevant to you. The standards apply all the same. I'm just keeping it simple today. We had, I think I've assessed one recently, which was about a data engineer. It was all about procuring
Yeah.
warehouses and building environments and stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily about an analytical output, but again, the standards can be hit from that as well. I don't know, Josie, if you've got examples of some of the more wider family ones you've seen.
No, I have seen a couple of data engineer ones myself, which are quite good because it just takes a different angle on things. But so long as you can relate the things that you're doing in your role and in your reflective practice to the standards, it kind of doesn't matter which one of those bits of the DDAT family you come from, because they are all part of the analytics, group. We normally sit all within BI teams, so it makes sense to include everybody.
Question in the chat about clinical coding, which I've come across before. Actually, I don't think I've actually seen one who's done it.
I've not seen an application form from that space.
What I would say is, when I've been asked this before, I think it would be possible at the practitioner level to hit the standards because again, it's about making decisions and presenting data. So there is some coding rules that, are about feeding back and working with the business, isn't it, from there. Might struggle for the high levels from there. What I would also say, and not to advertise other professional bodies in an AphA meeting, but there is obviously IRIM and other coding bodies where actually they may be more at home with. But clinical coding and data quality is another one where actually at that practitioner level, 100%, if AphA is the professional body you feel affinity to, and that's where you want to be registered to, definitely could make it work. I say you'd only struggle as you did the more senior, advanced, and leading levels, I'd say. Okay, so yeah, a bit of who you are. We've moved it to the top in the latest iteration or second box. This is published papers, conferences, presentations, award. It's not the time to be shy or modest about yourself. You know, if you've done some conference talking, won awards, whatever, stick it at the top, shout about it, be proud about it. You know, it's all showing off your skills and your evidence that you've been recognising your feedback. So do tell us at the top there. A little bit about your education and qualifications from there. Again, we're only just titles and locations and years, not full module details or anything. And again, there's a little bit about your career history. Again, this is just to give the assessor a feel for your journey, how long you've been analytics for. Again, roles, dates, organizations, no more than a sentence or two on key duties. This, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not assessed because it kind of, it's not set to a standard, but it is useful for the assessor. So a couple sentences there just to get a feel for who you are and what you do. And then hopefully that's not too fuzzy on screen there. But that's the example of the matrix from there. So again, this person started ticking them off in reflective practice 1, and then I'm going to talk about evidence in a minute. But in that evidence 1, they've said evidence 1 at E2, evidence 2, E3, evidence 3, and so on. The evidence they're providing cover those standards from there. So what will be really good at the end is once you've done your 3 effective practices, gathered all your evidence, tick them off, you should have a nice full matrix of no gaps. What I will say on this, and Josie did mention it, there is a little box at the end to reference standards that you've not felt you've covered in your reflective practice. What you might find is you've got a really good example, but there is just a standard that you can't quite, I won't use the word shoehorn into, but you just feel I can't quite say what I want to say because this example didn't quite cover it. I'll keep coming back to IG as an example of this, but yeah, GDPR, IG from there, you've done a good project, but actually that wasn't a factor. You've already wrote 3 reflective practices, and that's just the one that you're missing a bit. You can just provide some evidence, and there's a little box to elaborate on that from there. So don't worry if, for example, you've not ticked GDPR C6 in a reflective practice. You could just say evidence 10, or you can see in the section below, and that's where you can cover it from there. We do want the examples to be as organic as they can. So naturally there will be some stuff that you don't quite cover because your narrative, your story never took that way. Okay. Yeah, and there's an example of that section there. So this is just at the bottom of the application form. Is there any standards that you didn't feel that you referenced in your reflective practices from there? So this one just says about just demonstrating professionalism, and it is 3 paragraphs of how they feel they hit that. I'm going to say similar, you can never say that similar. Likewise on the contextual standards from there. Again, this might be something that you find hard to weave into your story. Because if somebody asks you to do an ad hoc, you don't reply back saying, this is my role in the organization, this is why I'm doing it. You just do it, don't you? So again, you can go back, and this example here, they've merged the cells here actually to say actually for C1, 2, and 3, and 4, here's 2 paragraphs, and I feel that covers that from there. And again, they've done the same for 5 and 6 around the IG. Again, wasn't covered as much in effective practice, so here's 2 paragraphs on evidence for that. Okay, I'm just going to finish with just a few walkthrough of the hubs and then some key dates. Is there any questions on the form or reflective practice? No, okay. This will be dead quick and dead simple, but just so you've seen it, so when you do get access, you're familiar with what it looks like. So once you do register, you'll sign up through the hub, and you'll log in from there. There's a little catalog where you can search for it's kind of like courses. There's a lot of other courses and events on there from FedIP, but if you search for AphA or professional registration, these will come up. And then when it appears, you can open these and download from there. And then once you've clicked into one, again, a mechanism you'll have used a million times, just select your files, upload them, drag and drop them in, whatever, and you can add a few little narrative points in there. You don't need to write anything in that box. That might be the point. So Josie mentioned before about I've not shared this because it's sensitive, or I've had a bit of trouble doing this, happy to have a chat, or anything you might want the assessor to know, but you don't need to do it. If everything's gone swimmingly, or you've got no questions, you don't need to. And then I'll just come on some key dates, and I'll talk about some of the questions in the chat. So the next registration window opens on the 1st of April and is open for the month. So we open them every quarter. So it'll be April, July, October, January for a year from there. So don't worry. Obviously, depending on what time you've got, you might start in April, not finish it, and then you can then pick it up again in another window. What I would say as well is, as we keep saying, we do want you to pass and we do want you to apply. So, if you're making a start in April and you're not quite there, but maybe like 70-75% of the way there, do reach out and let us know. We're happy to work with you. We can work with extensions and stuff. If you're nearly there, don't feel, oh, actually I'm on holiday for the last week of April. Again, completely flexible to support you through this. So 100% reach out if you think you can get some of it done before you have to stop. I mentioned at the start, 24th of April, we have the Q&A workshop. That is completely unstructured, so not like today. So you won't need to listen to me ramble on for 45 minutes. Bring your problems, bring your questions. There'll be a few members of the PDC there to answer them. Sometimes we get people there who've been fresh registered already, so good to speak to peers as well. But that's for you to bring your questions a week before the window closes. Window closes in April. PDC meets once a month, so in the May one, we'll then assign them to assessors. That's when you'll hear if there's any questions or feedback. Maybe you've missed something that you didn't realise, or if the assessor sees something that they want you to elaborate on, there'll be that's the back and forth window we spoke about from there. And then once it's approved, that gets ratified in the June PDC committee, and then following that is when you will be notified. I'll answer the question there about the re-register at the same level. I don't think you've answered that in the chat, have you? No.
I did. I just didn't tag it in. Yeah. But yes, you can go on the re-register at the same level, Mark, because you've recently completed that, haven't you?
Yeah. So if I normally do a show of hands about who's registered or who's started at the start. So if you've done this already, so if you're re-registering at the same level, it's a much shorter form, and I think it was 2 reflected practices, and it was like no application. The application form was just about evidence in CPD and learning, and 2 reflective practices. So it's a lot smaller if you're re-registering, and that's done at, so it's 3 years your registration lasts for. So that's in 3 years time you re-register. If you are going up a level when you re-register, that is the same as starting from scratch, unfortunately, because it's only if you're maintaining your level where you can do the smaller one from there. And that was it for me. Josie, is there anything I've missed that you want to pick up?
I don't think so. It was, obviously our dates, the windows are open quarterly, as Mark said. So it just gives us assessors time to work through all the applications and make sure that we can get the assessments back to you in a timely way. Obviously, do be patient with us, because sometimes we do this in our free time outside of our main jobs. So sometimes it takes us a little bit longer than we'd like to get through them. But do bear with us. I don't think there was anything else.
No, last call for any questions from
anyone?
anyone?
More questions from anybody?
No? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Hopefully that has been useful and made the process a bit clearer for you, and hopefully we see a lot of the names coming through in April window.
Thank you.
So if there's nothing else, good luck everybody, and I hope to see the application soon. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you, really useful.